This is Larry Florer's statement on the day of the assassination. I think it's the only statement he's ever made. This afternoon, about 10 minutes after the parade passed Poydras and Main Streets, I went to a little barbecue place on Pacific. I do not know the name of this place, and I went in and had a grilled cheese sandwich with a friend of mine, Richard Bartholow, who works at the National Bank of Commerce. They had a radio going on in the cafe. Two gentlemen that were seated at the table next to us had a radio on, and something came on the radio about the president being shot at. So I walked out with this other boy, and he went on to the bank, and I walked down to the railroad tracks at Pacific and Houston Street. I was walking parallel to some of the tracks there, and there were quite a few other people walking in the same direction as I was going. I stopped on the east side of Houston Street, across the street from the Texas School Book Depository. I stood there for a few minutes, and then a lady that was standing next to me, I asked her where there was a telephone, and she said that the only payphone that she knew of was in the county records building. She said that there were a lot of phones on the third floor of this building that I was standing in front of. She said that she worked on the third floor, and there was probably a phone up there that I could use. So I rode up the elevator with this lady and got off on the third floor with this lady, and we walked to the information desk, and this lady went on back to her department, to her spot. So then there was a lady at the information desk, and I asked her if I could borrow her telephone, and she said that all the lines were busy, or something to that effect. So I stood there for a minute, and a fellow walked up to me. He asked me what I wanted, and he told me that I couldn't use the phone. So I walked back down to the elevator and rode it back down to the lobby. As soon as I got to the lobby, I walked back outside, and the fellow that I had talked to about using the phone was pointing out the window, pointing toward me, and said that I was the man that was on the third floor. At this time, two officers walked up and said for me to come with them. These officers brought me to the county sheriff's office. At no time did I see anyone leave the building, the Texas School Book Depository, while I was across the street from it. Larry Florer. And we actually have film of Florer's arrest. And here you can see the police officer in the raincoat walks off toward that building there, and that's the Daltex building. And obviously he's in communication with somebody in a window in the Daltex building. So the first thing to notice here is that Florer apparently had gone into the Daltex building, not the county records building, as he said in his statement. He went into the Daltex building, and he was arrested in front of that. And here we can see that he's being taken over towards the Texas School Book Depository. So Florer apparently had been in the Daltex building, not the county records building, nor the Texas School Book Depository building. He was in the Daltex building. And then in a frame from some other film from behind here, we can see that Larry Florer is being escorted by some people to the sheriff's office. And here, from the other side, from the film, we can see that he's being flanked on both sides, and other people walking behind them to the sheriff's office. And on the Prayer Man website, one of these people walking with Larry Florer has been identified as H.H. Davis. Snooky Davis, he's a sidekick of William Alexander, the assistant district attorney. And then we have various photos of him sitting in the sheriff's office. So this is pretty good photographic documentation of Larry Florer's arrest and questioning. And this is from Deputy Lummy Lewis's report, where he's got a list of witnesses he dealt with, and he's got Larry Florence on here. Misspells the last name as Florin. And he notes here that was on third floor using phone. He doesn't note which building it was, but as I said already, in Florer's statement, it says the County Records Building, and according to the photography, it was the Daltex building. But Lummy Lewis doesn't make any distinctions. He was just on the third floor, and just reading this and not knowing anything else, you would think he means the Texas School Book Depository. And at 1:11 on the day of the assassination, on Channel 2 of the Dallas Police Radio, Inspector Sawyer says, "On the third floor of this book company down here, we found empty rifle hulls, and it looked like the man had been there for some time. We are checking it out now." And if we look at this photograph, the Powell photo of the Texas School Book Depository building, we can see that the third floor has no open windows on it, and the only window that doesn't have the shades drawn is other people. We know who they are. They're not shooters. So I think what's going on here is that Inspector Sawyer has confused the third floor that was reported regarding Larry Florer with some other report of having found the sniper's nest, presumably on the 6th floor, and has somehow turned it into a third floor sniper's nest. I think this is probably honest confusion on the part of Inspector Sawyer, and this confusion was introduced by the witness Larry Florer, or by a police officer talking about him. And this interpretation is supported by Deputy Alan Sweat's report. Here on page 2 at the top, he's talking about having found the sniper's nest. Not that he personally did, but he's describing it. And then he says, shortly after, a DPD officer brought a boy in a sport coat up and said, "Here is the man that done the shooting." And that would be Larry Florer. Officers started to question him. The crowd began to talk and pass the word around that this was the individual that had shot the president. At that time, in the company of city officers, I sent 2 deputy sheriffs to take this man into custody and take him to the sheriff's office. Also, Inspector Sawyer was informed of this, and he sent a DPD detective to the sheriff's office to talk to the boy. So I think probably the arresting officer who brought Larry Florer to the Texas School Book Depository, which is where the police command center was, he seemed to think this was the guy that done the shooting, because the guy on the 3rd floor of the Daltex building pointed him out. And then Alan Sweat told Sawyer about this, and then Sawyer just assumed that Florer had been apprehended in the Texas School Book Depository, and that he's the guy who was associated with the sniper's nest, and that it was really on the 3rd floor. I think that's what's going on with Sawyer, and it looks like genuine misunderstanding here. And then we have Ira Trantham here. He was a police officer, and this is from 1978. The HSCA interviewed him. And I'm going to start with the last paragraph here. By this time, they were joined by Jerry Hill, and he and Hill went inside. Hill continued upstairs, and an officer, W.H. Desham, approached him with a prisoner. Advised this subject had been observed acting suspiciously on the 3rd floor without a reasonable explanation for being up there. At the front door, Sawyer was apprised of this development and ordered him, Trantham, to take the subject across to the sheriff's office and interview him. This 15 to 20-minute interview, joined by Deputy Sheriff Longy Lewis, since deceased, developed the following information. Lawrence Huber Florer, male, white, 23, of 3609 Potomac, yada yada, had been standing at the corner of Main and Poydras and heard of the shooting over the radio. About 4 blocks from Houston, he walked down to see what happened. When accosted by Officer Disham, he said he was looking for a telephone. This is the extent of Trentham's recollection of the circumstances, including no physical description other than he was white, 20 and 23, seemed to be about the right age. Now, he's He's calling the arresting officer Disham. It's actually Officer Denham. He's the guy in the raincoat here. He's the only officer in the photography who's wearing a yellow raincoat. You can't see it's yellow here, but it's obviously the same guy. So apparently Trentham just has the name of the officer off a little bit. And the way he's telling the story here in his statement, it sounds as if Officer Denham is bringing the prisoner out of the Texas School Book Depository, because he's saying that Jerry Hill and he went inside. But what I think it really means is he was starting to go inside, and then that Officer Denham brought Larry Florer over before he went inside. So I think this is confusion once again, or promotes confusion, because Larry Florer was not arrested in the Texas School Book Depository. He was arrested in front of the Daltex building. So I think this is all understandably confused, and that the photography tells the true story of Larry Florer being arrested, where he was arrested. But now it starts to get interesting. This is from the Dallas Times-Herald, reporting about Larry Florer's arrest. Patrolman W.E. Barker saw workers in the Texas School Book Depository pecking on a window from the third floor and pointing to a man wearing horn-rimmed glasses, a plaid coat, and raincoat. The officer immediately arrested the man for questioning and placed him in a room full of witnesses in Sheriff Bill Decker's office across the street from the depository. With the young man protesting, the crowd all along the way jeered at him as he was escorted across the street. One woman said to the man, "I hope you die." Another screamed hysterically, "Is that him? Is that him?" An unidentified photographer shot a picture of the arrested man and then said bitterly, "I hope you burn." Officers on the case would not explain what connection the man might have with the shooting, nor would they identify him. Well, this is obviously Larry Florer. It's a little confused. It says somebody in the Texas School Book Depository was pointing at him from the third floor, when really it was the Daltex building. But obviously they're referring to the same person. But they're naming a police officer here. In fact, that's the only name mentioned at all, Patrolman W.E. Barker. I don't have the Richard Trask book, Pictures of the Pain, but according to Donald Hemingway Willis, Trask corrects this, he refers to this article and corrects the patrolman's name. He says that Barnett, or Barker, W.E. Barker, is actually W.E. Barnett. And that kind of makes sense, because we know that Barnett, W.E. Barnett, Welcome Eugene Barnett, was posted to that intersection, and we have photography of him on the steps of the Texas School Book Depository, so we know he was around there. So that makes sense that might be Welcome Eugene Barnett and not W.E. Barker.